Hey, good morning, Ankit. Welcome to the Indian Community Podcast.
Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
Good morning, Ankit.
Good morning, Rahul.
Great, thank you. I just wanted to congratulate you and wish you a very happy new year. It is the first day of the new year, and you're also the first guest of 2024.
Okay, there we go. Starting it off on the right foot, hopefully.
Excellent, thank you. So, Ankit, let's hear from you in terms of a little bit about yourself, a
Mhm.
small introduction, and something about your family and your journey to United States.
Yeah, so obviously my name is Ankit Jain. I grew up in the DC area in a suburb of Washington D.C. called Fairfax. And so my parents, they came to the US in the 80s and then they met in the US. I was born actually outside San Francisco, but I moved when I was 9 months old to Fairfax. And so have been in the area for a while. I kind of left the area for undergrad for law school and then came back after law school. So I'm a lawyer. I currently am working for this organization called FairVote, which is the main ranked choice voting advocacy group in the country. And prior to that, I was working at the Sierra Club, which is an environmental organization. And, I've been interested in these kinds of political issues for a while. I'm sure we can get into it, kind of what led me down this path. But democracy reform, as I think you can tell already, is one of my main passions. And so living in DC, we actually don't have the right to vote in DC because DC is not a state. And so that has been something that I've been involved in and trying to fight back against that, give us in Washington, DC, the democratic rights everybody else in this country has. And I've been working on that for the past few years. And this year, I decided to run for this position of DC shadow senator, which is the main job is to fight for DC to be a state to give us our democratic rights because I think we need someone in the position who can actually make statehood happen, and that's what I hope to do.
So, sorry, Ankit, what do you mean by standing for a shadow senator?
Yeah. So, Washington, D.C., we don't have any senators or representatives, and because we're not a state. So basically, we have no representation in Congress. For that reason, the D.C. government has created two shadow senators and one shadow representative to advocate for D.C. to be a state, to fight back against Congress's efforts to overturn our local laws because D.C. is entirely federal land. So Congress can do whatever it wants to D.C. right now. And then to serve as almost elected lobbyists for D.C. issues before the U.S. Senate to try to make Congress work in a positive way with DC instead of a negative way. So we're elected on the ballot as if we were full senators. We just don't have that vote in Congress. We're more like the leaders of the statehood community in DC, the organizing the campaigns to make statehood happen, to stop Congress from interfering in our affairs.
Okay, all right.
Excellent.
Mhm.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Ankit. Ankit, you mentioned about, your parents and your journey to where you are today. So tell us a little bit about your parents and how was their experience, especially arriving in the United States in the early 80s, because we were much younger then.
Yeah,
It was a time when there was no internet, there was no
yeah, yeah,
mobile phones, and
yeah.
it was a very different world from what we recognize this planet as today. So share us a little bit more about, the stories that you've heard
Yeah.
and what their experiences were.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, my parents really did not know a lot about the U.S. I think when they came here, I would say especially my dad. So my dad tells this story that he was told that in the U.S. instead of water fountains, they have Coke fountains. So instead of going to get water, you drink Coke. Obviously, that's not true, but he actually really believed it when he came to the U.S. And he was like, "Where's the Coke fountains?" And so, I think that they were not quite sure what they were getting into. So my dad, he came here to get a PhD in statistics from the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. And he came. Both of my parents are from Uttar Pradesh, but he came from UP. And then my mom, she came because my nana on my basically my mom's uncle had come to the U.S. many years before. My mom's uncle and aunt, and they were had become U.S. citizens, and they were able to sponsor other people to come in. So they sponsored my mom to come, and they were like, "Oh, come see what it's like. You can, if you don't like America, you can go back to India." And so I think that conservatives sometimes call this quote unquote chain migration. So I am a proud product of chain migration. And so I was able to so my mom was able to come here for that reason. My dad came here for the PhD, and my mom actually ended up, my mom's uncle and aunt, they were like, she such a great place. We should see if she, try to convince her to stay here. So they were trying to convince her to stay here. They started looking for relationships, for marriages, and they came across my dad. Back in the 80s, I think you guys might know this, but younger people might not. Before the internet, they used to have the matrimonial sections of the newspapers, right? And so they had that in the US. They had India Abroad, and then India Abroad had the matrimonial section. So my dad put up a listing in India Abroad, and he was in California. My mom was in Fairfax, and they saw the listing in the India Abroad matrimonial section, and they reached out to him. And so then my parents just met that way. My dad flew to Fairfax, Virginia, and ended up working out. So they ended up getting married. And so it was really, you know, both of them, I don't think either of them really maybe thought they were going to stay in the US long term. My mom was going to, see what it was like and probably go back to India. My dad was going to get a statistics PhD and go back to India. Didn't end up working out that way. My dad ended up staying in the US long term. My dad is an interesting story. He got really into the card game bridge and betting on professional sports, and stopped making progress on his dissertation. And he was actually kicked out of his PhD dissertation program. Ended up getting a master's out of his coursework, salvaging that, and finding a job in the U.S. in California, and then just decided to stay here. Had the job. Then he met my mom, and then rest is history. I guess he just ended up staying here. I don't think he would have told you when he was around my age that he was going to be in the U.S. long term.
No,
Amazing.
excellent, excellent. That's a fantastic story, especially the fountain soda. So,
Yeah,
in fact, Ankit, you'll be surprised. Like when I was growing up in India, that's what we used to call Coke. We used to call it fountain soda. Especially the ones that you see at these kiosks where you press a button and the soda pops
yeah,
out. And we used to call that fountain soda. So I don't blame your dad
yeah,
for expecting a fountain of
yeah,
Coke
yeah,
when he landed over here. We all
Yeah.
land with so many misconceptions about
yeah.
this land, but it's a beautiful country, and we really appreciate the opportunity to be living here. So that's great. And I also know there's one other fun story about your dad and his struggle for the green
Yeah.
card.
Yeah.
Would you like to share that one?
Yeah, I mean, so my dad, after he married my mom, he decided, I want to stay in the U.S. permanently. He was on the H-1B visa at the time, so he applied for a green card, employment-based green card. As I'm sure many of your viewers know, as you all know, it takes months to years to get a green card application process. This was true when he applied in like late 80s, early 90s. Also true today, I think even more so today. And so he had applied for his green card. This was before the internet, and so back then the way that they process applications, you apply and you have to wait for your date to come up for your application to be processed. And the way they let people know when their date was up for processing was the local immigration office would paste a piece of paper outside the immigration office window and saying these application dates are now being processed. And so my dad's local immigration office, they actually, what they started to do was they only processed a certain number of applications every day, and then they would close for the day, no matter how quickly or slowly they went. And so people started to realize this, and so they wanted to make sure their application was processed that day. So they started to show up right when the doors opened, when to make sure their application was processed. And then people, started to realize people were showing up right when the doors opened. So then people started showing up 10 minutes early. Then they started showing up an hour early. And then they started showing up 2 hours early. And then they started showing up 5 hours early. And then all that continued until my dad, waiting for his application process, he drives by the local immigration office on a Sunday morning, and he sees that actually a lot the data move forward very quickly. And so now his application and many other people's application dates are up for processing. And so he's like, what should I do? And he goes around and he sees there's already a line forming outside the door. This is Sunday morning. And so he goes home, calls his brother. He's like, hey, what should I do? There's a line outside the door. My application date is up. And his brother goes, well, you better get in line. And so him and my mom went to the immigration office Sunday, morning, afternoon, and they got in line. And they waited in line for almost 24 hours. And they slept in line overnight. So people thought they were homeless. They were trying to go up to them to give them food. And they had to tell my parents to tell them, no, we have food, we have a home, we just want to be American citizens. And this is the whole night they slept like this. My dad would tell us like they almost formed like a little government amongst themselves in the line. They had a piece of paper where they wrote down the order everybody was in line, so they didn't have to be like directly in line. They could just kind of congregate it in a circle. They had there was a pregnant woman, and they let her go home actually. And they said, "You go home, and when you come back in the morning, and we'll save your spot in line." And this is people from all over the world, you know, India, China, Africa, Europe, really you name it. Really kind of beautiful, like how they people came together in this moment, but also very sad because people had to go through this to get to be U.S. citizens, had to wait in line for 24 hours. And so, you know, my mom and dad, they slept in line overnight. They actually, when the doors opened the next morning, my dad actually had not, even though he had come at around like 1 p.m. the day before, he was still too late. And so they actually shut the doors down, and they had a lot of people there who were waiting for almost 24 hours who they were not letting in. Someone knew somebody in the local media, and so they called the local media over. Local media started filming, you know, like local immigration office has line of people waiting over 24 hours, not letting anybody in. And the immigration office saw the media filming. They opened the doors back up. They started taking more people. And so my dad was able to have his application processed that day, thankfully. And then he, you know, eventually he did get his green card and became a US citizen. And I think one of the reasons I'm so passionate about this is that he really sacrificed a lot to become a US citizen and to make sure that I could have those same rights that all US citizens have in this country. And yet I decided to move just, you know, a few miles away into the city. He's in the suburbs still. I'm in the city now. And I move across the river into the city. And all of a sudden I lose those rights that he fought so hard for, the right to vote, which really all citizens in this country deserve. And so that's one of the, you know, kind of factors driving me in this race.
Okay, that's a really powerful story, Ankit, because you know there are so many layers to that story, right? So
Yeah,
there is this whole backlog that is
yeah,
troubling a lot of
yeah,
immigrants, and then there's also this whole human side
hmm
of people getting together and making each other comfortable. So
yeah,
I'm really moved by that
yeah,
aspect, and every time I think of it, even my own personal experience
yeah,
with my green card application was kind of similar. Luckily, I did not have to stay
yeah,
there for 24 hours thanks to internet, so we were
hmm
able to take an appointment. But
yeah,
even if we had an appointment, we were still expected, according to the internet, to be there at least 3 hours in advance, right? So if the office
yeah,
opens at 8 o'clock in the morning,
hmm
people asked you to be there at 5 or 6 in the morning and
yeah,
stand in that queue. Although when I look back at it, I feel it may not really be required because these guys actually come out and ask for who has an
yeah,
appointment at what
yeah,
time, and then they
yeah,
let people in. So there's a lot of misconceptions out there about the way to go in and apply, but
yeah,
there's still a huge major backlog. And Ankit, what are your thoughts about this? Right, so there's a lot of noise in the media
yeah,
about immigrations and
yeah,
immigrants in total, but I think there are two aspects, right? So there's one is the legal immigrants,
hmm
especially people
hmm
coming in from India with an
yeah,
H-1B visa.
yeah,
There's a huge major backlog.
yeah,
There are families that have to wait for over 100 years to actually
yeah,
get that green card, and then
yeah,
maybe another 6 or 7 years to
yeah,
become citizens. Not a lot of us are going to be living that long
yeah,
unless science makes that progress, right?
yeah,
So, and this also affects the children of these, H-1B holders. A lot of them, when they, become 21 or 24, they have to leave the country, and a lot of them are actually considering Canada for that. So, what are your thoughts as a politician
mhm.
on this important subject?
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously very personal to me because my family had to go through this process. I think that immigration is what has made America great. Historically, you look at what we are as a country, we're a country that opens its doors to people who are looking for a better life. And you think about American monuments, the Statue of Liberty is the first thing that comes to mind. And you know what it says, like lift up your lamp for all those who the suffering and those who are seeking help. And I think we really are shooting ourselves in the foot in what we're doing right now. Like you said, people go their whole lives waiting to get a green card. I think it's ridiculous. It just I'll just give a personal example. My dad came to this country, not a lot of money. He came with like some money that they borrowed from my sister's like dowry money, and that was pretty much all he had. And he was supposed to pay that back. And he was able to get an education and start his own business, and that business now employs hundreds to thousands of American citizens in this country, right? And so that those jobs would not have been able to be created if he was not able to get his green card and citizenship. So those are examples of allowing more immigrants to this country benefits everybody, both the immigrants and the people who are already in the U.S. And so what we really need to revamp our immigration system. It's like it's totally broken. Our immigration system, the country caps are way too low, especially for big countries like India and China, where people have to wait for decades to get H1 to get green cards, where a lot of people are getting rejected for H1B visas. And what, I think that we need to do what we can. We need to massively increase these caps, allow more people into this country to allow for that entrepreneurship, for that job creation. A lot of these people who are coming into the country are very high skilled. They're just like primed to contribute to America, and they're just waiting for their opportunity. And to your point, a lot what our country's saying is, no, you can't come here. Go to Canada instead and make the jobs there. I don't get it. I don't think it makes any sense at all. I think it's ridiculous. I think we need to really massively increase and overhaul our immigration system. And I think that, I mean, people have been talking about it for a long time. I'm hopeful it can happen. One of the things that I like to point out is that DC is a very immigrant heavy city. There are a lot of immigrants in the city. If DC had those two extra senators, that one extra congressperson, I think our senators and congresspeople would be huge advocates for overhauling our immigration system and allowing more people in. And so that's one of the many reasons that I think we need voting representation here in DC.
Okay. So, Ankit, one thing I read on your profile was that you interned for Hillary Clinton.
Yeah.
How was your experience in interning for her?
Yeah, I mean that was I really enjoyed all of my political experiences because I've met people who I never really would have interacted with
Mhm.
in other aspects of my life. And so I was in New Hampshire. I was a field intern for Hillary Clinton. So means that I was the one who was calling people, cold calling people, and knocking on doors many hours a day, asking people to vote for Hillary. I really learned a lot, I would say, and still I'm connected with people to this day. Some of my best friends I met, on the Hillary Clinton campaign, and some of the volunteers who are still in New Hampshire are still supporting me now in this run. And so it was really interesting to like just hear people's different experiences and what they were looking for. This was a Democratic primary, so we were talking to Democrats, so we weren't talking as much to the independent voters. But I just think that being able to understand those different perspectives, I was in kind of a small town in New Hampshire, and understanding what people like that, like the life experience of people like that, but then also understanding how it's different and how it's actually very similar to many of us, and that people have the same hopes and dreams. I would say it was very interesting, and I was able to meet Secretary Clinton a few times, which is really a great experience, and hear her at town halls and answer questions. And so really, I mean, just like a great experience meeting some of my best friends to this day who now have moved to DC along with me. I will say it was a lot of work. It was definitely hard work. We were literally cold calling people 3 hours a day every day, and that takes a lot of energy out of you. But I mean, I think that if anybody is interested in campaigns, interning in the field operation is almost a must, because you really understand what a campaign is about when you're talking to average voters and trying to speak for the campaign in that way.
So, how did you get into all this at such a young age? What drove
Yeah.
you?
I've always been interested in kind of social justice, social change. I think it's a little bit of a stereotype for people my age, like millennials, but the President Obama's
Yeah.
2008 election was really what got me interested in politics,
Mhm.
and he really inspired me into believing that this is something that can make a difference in the political world, and that we're the ones who are looking for, right? That we're the ones who are going to make the impact. And so I started following with President Obama's 2008 election, continued just following the news pretty closely, then started volunteering. My first volunteer opportunity was for the Fairfax congressman, still the congressman in Fairfax to this day, Jerry Connolly, and ended up being very involved in President Obama's 2012 re-election effort when I was in undergrad at the University of Chicago, and was able to go to his victory rally in Chicago, which is a great experience. and then interned for the Senator Mark Warner's campaign in Virginia. And all of that kind of like made me interested in this political world. I kind of was thinking after undergrad, do I want to go into campaigns or do I want to do law? Because that law, social change type law. So I ended up working for a campaign in Florida, the Patrick Murphy Senate campaign in 2016. And then from there I went to law school. I went to Columbia Law in New York City for 3 years. And I decided I wanted to do social change law because I was wanted to make an impact, make a difference. And really for me, I think it's just I feel like to make an impact on people's lives kind of drives meaning. This is in my life. And so that's something that I want to do as a way to try to make the world a better place. And it just something I've been passionate about for a long time now. So this kind of social change work is something I've been passionate about for a while. Like I said, democracy issues were my number one. And this year I just decided, I guess now last year, because we're now in 2024, was when I decided, hey, let's actually run for office myself, and I can get into that as well. But I thought the person in office in this position right now was not doing such a good job, and so I thought I needed to throw my hat in the ring and offer a different alternative.
One takeaway for our listeners here is that, it doesn't happen all overnight. You
Hmm.
have been into it from last 15 years. You have been,
Yeah.
going through this journey and understanding it all and being through this. So yeah, that's
Yeah,
great. That's
I,
great to know.
I definitely think so. Like you want to try to understand what you're getting into, but I also think that there's nothing stopping you from starting that path, right? Anybody can, I
Right.
think anybody can do it. So I think if you're passionate about it, you should go for it.
Cool. Yep. Yep.
So, Ankit, being a young politician, I think whenever we think about politicians, or especially when we were growing up, we were always looking at politicians as, people who've kind of hit their prime in terms of
Yeah.
age, right?
Yeah.
But now we see a big breed of young politicians coming out, and, for reasons, similar to yours. I was wondering, what do you think are the most common misconceptions that people have about younger politicians? Are you guys fun, or are you always serious?
No, I think we're fun. I would hope that people don't think we're always serious. I think that, sometimes people might think that younger people like don't maybe have a pulse on the community or something like that, which I don't think is true because I think well, one, I think that no one can really have like, a pulse on the whole community. Everybody has their own little circles that they're involved in. But there are a lot of, especially in cities like, DC, there are a lot of young people here who have not really been represented, right? Historically, we've had a lot of, older politicians in office who or maybe don't understand what it's like to be a young person trying to rent a house because they've owned their house for 20, 30 years now, who maybe don't understand what it's like to have to, rely on public transit on the metro system on the buses because they have cars. And so I think that there is a lot of value in having that different perspective here. And I think with young people, you just come with a certain amount of energy, and kind of like not just energy, but a new way of thinking. Not being stuck as much on the old ways of thinking. And so that's what I'm trying to bring forward is that energy, that new way of thinking, and that understanding of what it's like to be trying to make it in this city. I am myself a renter, and I think that most people in DC government are not. And so I just want to bring that perspective. I think it's important, and I think it's important also for people on the national stage to know that to have young people in the city represented and see what they can contribute to the national stage.
Yeah. Good. So Ankit, you are, basically you are an Indian. I mean, an American living in India. So
Yeah.
an Indian from by heart also I can say. So
Hmm.
and I, know that you keep visiting India
Hmm.
quite often
Hmm.
than a lot of other people.
Hmm.
So, how do you engage with the Indian community
Yeah.
in your area, and how do you, contribute or plan to contribute to them?
Yeah. So I mean, I growing up, I obviously grew up within the Indian community, and so like, to this day, a lot of my parents live still in the Virginia suburbs, in the Northern Virginia suburbs in Fairfax, and uh, I'm really trying to make sure that the Indian community is involved in my campaign, engaged. there is a very large Indian community in the DC area. It's one of the biggest, I would say, in the country, other than, maybe you'd say New York area, the kind of Houston area and DC area, I think are some of the biggest, maybe Seattle area and San Francisco area as well. Those would probably be the top five. And so I think that there is like a very large Indian community in this area. I remember when my parents came here, there was no Indian stores. They had to get there. Had a hard time finding like naan or roti or something like that. Now, you have humongous H marts that are like bigger than your average grocery store. And so the community has really risen in prominence, but not in terms of political power. There still, to this day, there's very few Indian American elected officials in the area. In Washington, D.C., I would actually be the first Indian American elected official above the advisory neighborhood commission level. And advisory neighborhood commission is kind of like a lower level hyper local elected office. And I would actually be the first. I might be, I believe, be one of the first. I wouldn't be the first, but I'd be one of the first immigrants elected to office in DC as well, from an immigrant background. And so, I want to bring that perspective. I think that when you hear this kind of stories that I just described to you of your parents sleeping in line to get their green card growing up, it kind of gives you a different perspective on politics and on life. And so I want to bring that perspective forward. And I want to make sure that the Indian community, which is so large in this area, is represented. And I'm definitely engaged with that community and having them come out to events and volunteer and things like that, to make sure that people understand that there is a large Indian community in this area that wants and deserves representation, and I hope to provide that to them.
I think that's excellent, Ankit. I think it is very important that the Indian community comes together and helps you achieve that goal. How is your fundraising for your campaign going, and how can people reach out to you and contribute?
Yeah. So we just had our most recent update in terms of the campaign was we all had to file our first fundraising reports. And so, I'm very happy with how we went. We raised a little over $52,000 in the first fundraising quarter, which is actually more than anyone has ever raised for this race over the course of an entire campaign. And we were able to do it in the first, 2-3 months, which I'm very happy about. And also, we did a lot better than our competitors, so I was very happy about that as well. And people, if they're interested, they should check out my website. It's Jain, Jain 4FORDC.com. And that link has a link to find out more about my campaign, to donate and to volunteer. We always need support, but financial support is always important because that's how campaigns run, for better or worse. And then volunteer support is always extremely important. There's a volunteer button on our website. We are just about to start signature collection to get me on the ballot. It starts on January 12th, and we have to get 2,000 signatures. And so if anybody is interested and has some time to volunteer in DC, we're just getting that started. And then you can always send an email through our website, and we that goes to us, and we read those emails. And so people should definitely get involved that way.
Absolutely, Ankit. We'll add your link in the description of this video, so our listeners and people who watch this video can definitely find that link easily. Thank you.
So, Ankit, before we move any further, do you want to share any fun fact that people don't know about you?
Fun fact about me. Well, I mean, one is that a fun fact about me, I'll say, is I'm actually a vegetarian, been a vegetarian my whole life. And what I like about DC is a city, very easy to get vegetarian food, a lot of different food options in DC. One fun fact that people should maybe know about this campaign or about DC politics, I'll say, so that DC has recently passed a law allowing non-citizens to vote in local elections. So you do not have to be a citizen to vote in DC anymore. You cannot vote in DC for president, or unfortunately, you cannot vote for this race or for the shadow representative race, but you can vote for mayor, for city council, for attorney general. And so if you are living in DC, thought you couldn't vote, that's no longer true. You now can vote. The DC Board of Elections is going to be posting within the next month. It's going to be putting online, updating its online registration system to allow non-citizens to vote, register electronically. You can actually register now by going in person to their office. but that's obviously not feasible for most people. So I would say just keep on checking their website. They're going to be updating it within the next month to allow non-citizens to register to vote, and that'll give you the option to register and finally have an impact in stuff like your schools and the traffic lights and things like that that affect your everyday life.
That's a great update. Yeah, thank you.
Excellent. That's not just a fun fact; it's also a very useful fact, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
this is going to be very helpful for a
Yeah.
lot of people.
Hmm.
Ankit, we'll get into a quick rapid fire, and since you mentioned food,
Hmm.
your first rapid fire question
Yeah.
is favorite Indian food.
Okay, I'm gonna be a little bit generic. I do love Shahi Paneer. Paneer, just like growing up, it's just you can't beat it. If I had to say a number two other than paneer, I would probably say chole bhature. So yeah,
Ah,
those are my top two.
whenever you visit Atlanta next time, let me know. I'm going to take you to this awesome place for chole bhature,
Yeah.
and you'll really love it. It's one of these chains from India,
Yeah.
New Delhi, which is actually opened up over here.
What's it called?
It's called Nathu Sweets,
Okay, cool.
and they're in Decatur. And I was there about 3 weeks ago, and it's
Mhm.
it's mind blowing. So you must
Nice.
have the chole bhature
Yes.
at Nathu
And when
Sweets.
you plan to come to India, I'll be your host.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Talking about cities, right? And we heard that you travel a lot. Which is
Mhm.
your favorite Indian city?
My favorite Indian city. So I'll say that I like. I'll give you a two-part. Bangalore. I really loved the multiculturalism of Bangalore and the weather. The weather is very nice in Bangalore, but I got to say the infrastructure in Bangalore is not the best. And so I do love Delhi. Has that the roads are very nice, and the Delhi has a lot of great food options and places to go. And so between Delhi and Bangalore, I don't know if I could choose between the two of them, but those are the two favorites that I visited, I would say.
That's great.
Hmm.
Yeah, I have fond memories of both cities, so
Yeah,
I can relate with what you said.
yeah.
Ankit, next question. Favorite Bollywood movie?
Favorite Bollywood movie. So I fell off a little bit in watching Bollywood movies since I was more in high school and I would go with my parents. So this is going to be like an older one, but I really liked Dil Chahta Hai, classic. That was
Excellent,
one of the
excellent.
I used
I'm
to watch
sure
that
all
all
of
the
us like it.
yeah, yeah.
And your favorite Bollywood actor or actress?
It used to be Shah Rukh Khan growing up as a kid.
Okay.
I don't know if I would say that anymore. Remind me the name of the guy is it Ranbir Kapoor who was in, or who was that?
That is Imran Khan.
Imran Khan.
That
Okay.
is nephew of Amir Khan.
Yeah, yeah. So it might be Imran Khan now. Definitely
Imran.
growing up, it was Shah Rukh Khan. Yeah.
Excellent, excellent. That is great. Thank you so much for giving us this time and this opportunity, Ankit.
Mhm.
We really loved speaking with you. Any last message that you would like to share with our listeners?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the last message that I would share is, I mean, DC statehood. I think obviously people who live in DC understand the importance of it, but I think the importance actually goes beyond just the impact of people who live in DC. DC, for people who live in the greater DMV, DC, Maryland, Virginia area, we share a lot of the same problems. Transportation is one example, both metro and our roadways, and we all benefit from some of the same solutions. If we had two more senators from DC and one more representative from DC who were advocating for federal funding or for other federal solutions to some of the problems that we all face as a region, I think it would make a real impact on our ability to solve these problems. So even if you live in Maryland or Virginia, it's an important cause because it benefits you as well. I think for people who live in big cities, I think this is a really having DC as a state, having two senators from Washington D.C. This would be the only two senators who are representing a completely urban area and really focused on urban problems, big city problems. You often see cities get short shrift, especially in the Senate, which is kind of tilted more towards rural areas. This is an opportunity for city issues to really get uplifted. If you had two senators from DC talking about gun violence, for example, or about public transportation, that would really, I think, shift the calculus in the Senate and really change the conversation and make people think a little bit more about these issues and trying to solve these problems. So I think if you live in a big city as well, it's a cause that's important to you as well. And I think you want somebody in this position who has the vision for how this position can actually be used effectively and has that experience and to actually get DC statehood across the finish line. So I mentioned I worked at the Sierra Club. I currently work at FairVote. I've done legislative advocacy in both of those roles. I want to take that legislative experience I have and bring it to this role and have somebody who's very strategic and has a plan to actually make DC statehood happen and is willing to work collaboratively with the entire statehood community to make sure that we are working together and rowing in the same direction. And so that's what I hope to bring, that strategic ability, that vision, and that experience to actually make DC statehood happen. And so I hope you are interested in the campaign. You can support it and check out my website if you are.
Thank you, Ankit.
Excellent. Thank you so much,
Wish you-
Ankit, and it was a pleasure
wish you a
to
lot.
host you.
Yeah, exactly. Great to talk to you all.
Yeah. Thank
you.
you.
Thanks, bye, guys. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.